Good evening.
Aloha.
Good evening.
Hey, all.
Hello. Hey, Alex.
Hello.
Hey, Josh.
Hi, Jess.
How are you?
Hi, everybody.
Josh and Alex, just a heads up. Later this week, you're going to get something from either Jeremy or me or Sarah, just to help ask you to socialize the implementation chapter with your respective committees. So that's coming.
It's probably going to have to be next month for mine, just because our meeting is Thursday and we're doing permits, so there's no way we're going to get to anything else. So
We've
Yeah,
got time.
We've got time. And also, I think the thinking is that it may not be something you have to talk about as a committee. I mean, it kind of depends on whether people want to actually have a conversation or if people just want to have a look and give feedback.
Okay.
It doesn't need to be it's not that it requires a vote or anything.
yes, but my committee likes to talk, so yeah.
Then you might want to ask them to do it individually.
No, I don't want to do that. Okay, sounds good. I'll look
Right.
forward.
I feel like
Right.
your permit meetings are a version of our liquor license violation meetings, where it's just like an exercise in stamina.
Mhm. Yeah, about 9:30. I'm like, yeah. I'm excited. Can't you tell?
It's going to be awesome. I'm sure there's no better way to do permitting, field permitting.
We just actually finally have a policy now. I wrote a policy that we just passed, which is so exciting. We actually have like something to base it on. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure everything will go wrong, but yeah.
That's good. Hey, Justin. Hey, Margaret.
Hello, everybody.
Margaret, I haven't seen you since the newest. Congratulations. I don't know how long ago it happened, but I just happened to see it. Congrats.
Thank you.
Oh, what's the big news? Oh, I don't want to put you on the
Sorry,
spot. You
sorry
don't.
if it wasn't supposed to be.
Some good news. New job.
Exciting.
Yes, congratulations, Margaret. The newest superintendent. Very lovely.
Arno let the what's the idiom? The bag out of the cat
Cat
out of the bag.
Cat out of the bag.
Yeah, that one.
Now I got to Google.
Yeah.
Oh, I found it.
Yep.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Hingham, right?
Yes.
My brother does a local television program in Hingham, so I may have him reach out and interview you.
Absolutely.
Would you like that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Texting him right now.
All right, we're gonna let's go 2 more minutes, all right?
While we're waiting, it's a great photo of you in the paper, in the Patriot Ledger, Margaret.
Someone say something so I can see if my headphones are finally working.
Can you hear us, Andrew?
No luck. I can hear you, but it's not over the headphones.
Just coming from like some surround sound system in your house?
Now coming from the computer itself, which means you'll get all the background noise of my family doing their thing and they'll hear you.
Josh, do you mind starting the slideshow? Right on cue.
I was ready for that question.
We've only done this meeting a few times. All right, we'll get started, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a while. I can't even remember when our last meeting was. I think December, right? Feels like it's been a while. Again, thank you for your tenacity through this process. I know we started way back in, I believe, November 2019. Here we are in 2022. So I never said this was going to be a short process, but for the most part, we've stayed on our timeline about 2 years, and plus or minus a few days and a few meetings in between. But thanks for your dedication. I just want to, I say that every meeting, but it takes a lot. I know you all have busy lives. There's always meetings that can drag you away, other priorities, but thank you for being here with us through this. And unfortunately, most of this has been virtual. We did get to see each other at the community meeting, which was definitely a refresher, but we've made the best of this. So without that, Josh, if you can go to the next slide. I do see our beloved Dedham TV is here with us tonight. So thankfully we all got our TV makeup and look great for TV. So thank you, Dedham TV. We always look great anyway. So these are just some of the logistics. Any members of the community, we have a comment period at the end, and we're a bit of a family nature to this. And if you feel you have pertinent questions during the course of this meeting, in addition to committee members, feel free to raise your hand and we'll recognize you. Next, Josh. Here's our illustrious master plan committee. We've been through thick and thin over this past 2 years. And next slide, Josh. And here's our core values that have been consistent through this whole master plan and codified in our draft master plan and embellished quite a bit. And so thank you for this. And we've been mindful to all these values and expectations at each of our meetings. Thank you, Josh. And with that, I'm going to hand it to our beloved consultant, Josh Fiala from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, who's been here since, I believe, December 2019. So I'll hand it to Josh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all again, Master Plan Committee members. It's sad to think that we won't be meeting like this on monthly occasions, but I know that there's good work to do and to continue in Dedham, so hopefully we'll all get to reconnect over that in future work. But our agenda for this evening is to take a look at the feedback that we've heard through the comment period that was open through December into this new year, and then also talk a little bit about the draft implementation plan. And then once we get through that feedback and talk about it some, have an endorsement, so a committee vote of the plan to pass that along to the planning board would be the next step. And then we've got some housekeeping to do in terms of meeting minutes, but then we also have some next steps to talk about and some important ideas about what happens next with the master plan itself. And then we'll have any room for public comments and wrap this up. So in terms of draft chapter feedback, and it was, I think, a really great reflection of how well the committee has worked together and worked on this project and process, that all of those chapters came together at the beginning of December. We had the community celebration event, and then there was a pretty extensive comment period open for 45 days, which is, I think, in my experience, pretty generous. So through all that, we had about 50 attendees of the community celebration, which if you recall, was a hybrid event. So we had attendees both in person and on Zoom, and I think that worked out very well. It was one of the larger and among the first hybrid events of that nature that MAPC has hosted. So Dedham was on the forefront of leading that type of engagement in the region. And I think it went very well. We got a lot of positive feedback. People from the Zoom side of things felt like they were engaged and participated in a meeting. People in person enjoyed the experience of getting back together and seeing people not mediated by a screen. And so that was a really, really, I think, enjoyable event for a lot of people. Through the feedback survey, which was established and promoted at that event, and then through some email blasts and on the town website, we had 150 people connect with that survey, which I think is a great number in terms of people still participating in the process. And it wasn't necessarily designed so that every single person would go through the entire draft plan chapter by chapter and give us feedback on each one. So we ended up with a range of people who responded to the different chapters, and we ended up on average right around 35 or so people responding to each of the chapters, leaving comments, doing some prioritization. So I think that's, you know, a good participation rate. I'm sure people sort of picked and chose which chapters they were most interested in. Overall, I would characterize the feedback as either positive or neutral. We had a few comments occasionally that were negative about a certain topic. We had a few commenters that had maybe a more negative perspective on the entire process, it appeared. But overall, I would say those were voices that were in the minority, and most of the comments were very constructive in nature and or positive and congratulatory, in fact. So I think that's a very good place to be in at the end of a process like this, that we didn't see a distinct pattern of, you know, negative voices focusing in on a certain idea or topic or recommendation of the plan. So overall, all very good. The demographics of that participation reflected what we've seen throughout the process. So I think good representation across the various neighborhoods. So you can see that pie chart on the left is relatively evenly divided. That's been reflected throughout the process. Similarly, in the age range, still skewing a little bit in terms of the older demographics, but that's been what we have seen all along. But it's good to see a good amount of that green chunk in the 35 to 49 range, which is that, you know, you can imagine the generation that will be in Dedham for a while, hopefully. And then similar, well, actually, this is a little different. We've had, I think, more female participation than male participation in terms of gender breakdown. But so you see a little more male participation in the survey. And I think it's very good to see actually a few respondents that self-identify as gender non-binary, just to make the point that that's a way for people to feel seen and included in a survey, and hopefully that small move is a way to be more welcoming and inclusive, as we've tried to do throughout this process. And then in terms of the race breakdown, still a predominantly white audience that's interacting with the material, but we have seen, you can see those smaller pie chart slivers, a range of other races in the town which are represented, but not to the amount which they are part of the demographic pie chart of the town. So that's something that we've recognized and worked on throughout the process, and most specifically with those inclusive interviews, which we've talked about in past meetings. So just a few items about the feedback specifically. There were two main categories of feedback which we're looking at. One was the prioritization of the goals themselves, and we did get some, I think, feedback about reordering a goal or two in each of the topics mostly, and I'll walk you through that. And I think it makes sense judging those upon the conversation at large of the master plan. So we're trying to reflect on this feedback relative to the sort of abstraction of what we've heard over a 2-year period, and a lot of very solid and individual conversations and group feedback. And then the other feedback that we've heard, and this was also from our co-chairs and staff leadership as well, that the leading the arrangement of the chapters with public health was a little bit intense. I would maybe describe it as, for people. It's a topic which is maybe a little less familiar to many people, a little a little deeper in terms of its depth and presentation. So we decided to shift that actually to be the follow-up chapter, which kind of ties everything together once you've been introduced to all of the other more accessible and familiar chapters. So the leading order then would be land use and zoning, which we felt also was appropriate given that it's ultimately a product from the planning board, and that's the topic which is most closely related to the planning board's charge. So that's one thing that would change the order of the overall plan and how it's presented together as a compiled set of chapters. So wanted to point that out, and we're happy to hear feedback on that if people agree or disagree with that. But just keep that in mind, and we'll kind of get into some of these too, just to give you a few more things to react to. So in terms of the priorities, so what we saw here in land use was that advancing preservation of natural and historic resources and open space assets and making those integral to the town, that was caught on as and I think has shown up in many of our conversations as a priority. So the feedback and the scoring that we saw through the survey would move that up to number 2 and push directing and managing growth more proactively down to number 3, which I think is also consistent, that we've seen less of a focus on development in general is how I'd characterize it, more as a focus on open space and preservation. And then similarly, we see the notion of leveraging, the goal number 4, leveraging private development investments to advance the master plan vision, among other things, moving that down to the lowest set of the goals, number 6, which would then elevate strengthening compact neighborhoods and focusing growth and improvements for non-vehicular connections. So I think to me, those make sense. We're not eliminating any goals, we're just reordering them a little bit. And I think that is reflective of the process. So I'm trying to get a feel for the format in the committee right now. So would people like to comment on everything I've talked about so far, or should I just keep on rolling? Maybe just keep going, see what else pops up. All right.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get a lot of comments on those first couple.
Okay, thank you. The next topic in this order is economic development. In the move here, which I think is very consistent with what we've heard, is to elevate the goal, which is focused on Providence Highway and transformative growth on Providence Highway. And that would elevate that from goal number 5 in economic development all the way up to goal number 3, and then shift down 3 and 4, which were improve the ability for people who work in Dedham to live in Dedham and to retain a strategic balance and mix of uses. I think to me, that's very consistent with what we've heard and makes a lot of sense. The Providence Highway has been a feature and focus of a lot of our conversations. In housing, what we saw was sort of 2 goals which had movement. Goal number 3, which would be to provide policy and program support for vulnerable households that may be at risk of eviction, foreclosure, or other housing securities, moving that up to number 2 as a priority, which would shift down promoting equitable development that includes all incomes, races, ethnicities, and family sizes, which I think is a good goal, but also, again, reflects the preference for de-emphasizing development is the way I'm sort of reading some of this reprioritization. And then looking at goal number 4, which was improve zoning to better align with preservation, improvement, and diversification of the town's housing stock, moving that down to number 6, which would elevate leveraging mixed use development and multifamily residential development for areas that would benefit, and then promoting strategic community engagement to reduce misconceptions about housing. So those 2 would be elevated accordingly, which again, these things to me seem consistent with the conversations that we've been having. In natural, cultural, historic resources, a little bit different than the others we just touched on. There were no changes in terms of the order of any of these priorities. I think that's an indication that we're channeling the information which is in the open space and rec plan. We're channeling the information that's in the climate action plan. And so these are also reflecting the order of those plans, and I think are about right. In transportation, just one change where goal number 3 would move to number 2 and switch places with number 2. So goal number 3 is optimize the streets for parking transportation infrastructure to create more vibrant, people-centered and flexible spaces. That's effectively what's been happening in Dedham Square and other places during the pandemic. So you're seeing like the outdoor seating, for example, and keeping that a priority and focus and moving that up to number 2, which would move down to number 3, reducing the risk of traffic-related injuries and fatalities and increase safety and convenience for all types of travel. Still important and has been a focus of many of our conversations, but just making that switch. Nothing by way of reordering in community facilities and services either. And then in governance, a single reordering where number 5, which is define expectations, goals, and development opportunities for boards and committees and encourage increased collaboration and coordination between the boards, gets elevated to number 4, which was more focused on the town staff, workforce planning, talent management, and aligning representation for town employees. So that, again, is consistent with what we're hearing. We've heard a lot of focus around the boards and committees and how they're working together. And then lastly, with the new relocated public health chapter to that cleanup, so to speak, this would be moving goal number 6 to support daily physical activity and eliminate risk of traffic-related injuries and fatalities up to number 4, which I think is consistent with everything we've heard about active transportation and walkability and the related goals and strategies to it. So that's the prioritization. And so the goal would be, and I open up all of these changes to discussion now with the committee, but the idea would be that we actually make these changes in the plan document. So everywhere that that order would come up in the plan itself, we move these around so that they reflect this order that I've just presented. And then also in the implementation chapter, that the ordering within that table would change as well. So this would just be, reflect what we've heard. So thoughts about all of this?
So I think I understand reordering them to sort of, just as you're reading through the list, that the things that you're hearing are of more importance appear first. But was it always the goal that these sort of had an order to them, like, plan of attack, we do goal 1 first, goal 2 second, kind of thing?
I don't think I think they have been ordered by us as we put them together and to reflect sort of where we thought the conversations were, but they have not been explicitly anywhere expressed in the plan where don't start on number 2 until you've done number 1. They're not sequential in that nature, but I think as a list, people will automatically read some priority into them. So this was a check with the community about how that prioritization works.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
Shaw?
Joe, I might have to have you check your mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My question is a process question, Josh, and it is, have these various ideas that you outlined for us just now been reviewed with the chairs of the committee and professional staff and so on, so that we have some assurance that they've been at least vetted before tonight by the people who need to know?
Yes, yeah, this information was shared with our sort of core team, and we've talked about it. The other thing I did.
Oh,
go ahead, Jeremy.
So this back in the fall, when we brought this out to all those community open houses, the priorities and strategies were all vetted and shared with as many communities, departments as possible. I think it's probably touched them all. And I believe it's in our plan that we had focus groups that were with all the departments and related boards We've leaned on you as committee members to work with your associated boards and committees. So I think that's all reflected in this, changing of the guard from all those comments.
Right, no, but I mean, my question is that more nearly in time, have the committee chairs actually weighed in and supported your reordering? That's all I wanted to know.
Oh, our committee. You mean Sarah and
our-
Jessica?
Yes, I mean Sarah and Jessica, yes.
Sorry. I thought you meant
Yes.
our many boards.
Okay, that's all, that was the process point I was looking for. Thank you. And let me say, I have been in the middle of a trial that began in December and is about to conclude, and I may need to break off. And I certainly, if the vote comes up before, I mean, after I have to break off, I apologize, but I'd like to give a proxy to the chairs to vote in favor of the plan as presented. Okay, if I may do that procedurally.
Thank you, Shaw.
Thanks, Shaw. And I just, your comment about process also reminded me that I didn't mention that these the reordering that I've shared with you all includes responses that we received both in person at the community forum and also through the survey itself. So we've compiled all of the forms of engagement that we've received in that 45-day comment period, just to make that note.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Sharna, yes.
Yes, my question is, did the feedback from all that community engagement inform the ordering of the chapters themselves? Or what is the rhyme or reason behind the ordering of the chapters?
I think it was both. I would say, I would characterize it as coming as much from our team's leaderships or co-chairs and the staff in terms of how that initial chapter was reading as a like first introduction to the content of the plan, but also comments that we received in the survey regarding the public health chapter were the most sort of reflective of people saying this is very dense content. This is very hard to read and get through and to sort of pull apart. And we didn't hear that feedback in any of the other chapters.
The reason I asked that question is because for me, it just seems like transportation should follow housing. It just seems like a natural progression to go from economic development to housing and then to transportation.
I'm open to that.
Yeah.
So that would effectively switch the order of transportation and natural, cultural, historic resources.
That makes sense to me.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
Are people all right with that? The committee fine with that? I'm fine with that.
Fine with me.
Good with me.
So we can make that change as well. I think one thing that is maybe a little tough is we have kind of, through the process of review with the committee and the way we've shared them with the community at large, they have been shared more as individual chapters. So we haven't, except for the sort of placeholder at the table of contents at the very front of the introductory chapter, they're not presented in order very often. So I think reflecting on how the chapters are presented as a sequence is something that we have given less attention to as a group. But I appreciate that, Sharna.
Yeah, Josh, you're probably the only one that's seen this in its entirety, all in one piece, right? We've yet to unveil it.
It's a big file. Other thoughts or questions about the prioritization? And then next we have some sharing of the individual comments as well, just to give you a preview. Okay, so I'll make note of the reordering for transportation, but otherwise I think the plan will be to integrate these shifting of goals within the chapters themselves. So we'll reflect that in the final version of the plan. So now to share just a few comments from each of the chapters. So these aren't all the comments, but I tried to pick out comments that were reflective if we heard sort of a few in a similar vein. And so I'll just give you, this gives you a flavor of what we've seen and heard. And I can share we have an Excel file with, the entirety of every comment if people want that. So in the introduction and vision, we got feedback that it was well organized, easy to read, which are great things to hear because this is the sort of starting point for many people. Some questions be more specific about the process so we can integrate a little bit more information, how committee members were chosen, for example, why did community participation decrease over time? Those are, procedural details which we can include, and so can respond to some of those comments in that way. Just as an editorial note, so decreasing community participation over time is basically the pattern in many of these planning processes that we see. When it happens in the opposite way, it actually is often an indication of a major problem in a planning process where you see community participation increase dramatically at the end of a process. It means that there's some sort of issue which has occurred and a real trust problem in the process is what we found. So how will the plan make visible and meaningful differences in the lives of people who live and work here? Hopefully if that individual continued to read through some of the other chapters, that might have become more evident, and that's a lot about what the implementation of the plan is too. Throughout the plan, we saw consistent comments from a few commenters that they don't want Dedham to become a city, they want to remain as a town. So that was a recurring theme through comments, and that schools should or could have been emphasized more as a priority. And just pause me if you want to comment on any of the comments as we're going along. In land use, the focus on developable land is sort of at odds and sort of runs against some of the environmental goals of the plan. That is rightfully pointed out. There's a dynamic there, which is a push and pull in all land use and land preservation planning efforts. So that balance is important, and we try to strike that balance throughout the plan. There's some discussion through some comments about that we don't, there's like a chicken and egg issue going on where it's not that you necessarily need to produce more housing units because it's the housing units that are creating population growth, and it's more about the town deciding if they want more population growth or not that they need to create more housing units. So that's, I think, some people think of it that way. I think that there are clear indications that the housing market in the greater Boston region needs more housing units, and that is dramatically impacting affordability. So that's covered, I think, pretty well in the housing document or housing chapter, as well as the land use. Mixed use zoning is great. There was a few comments about the support for mixed use zoning, about walking and biking, but then also balanced with comments about the more recent development in Dedham and how growth to some opinions seems too fast or too out of control. So I think we are balancing those things in the plan, and I would view it overall as a balanced approach. A business incubator such as Liftoff Dedham, I actually don't know, had not heard about Liftoff Dedham. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Liftoff Dedham, but that was something specifically referenced. I'll look that up and see if that has a place in the plan anywhere. Moving away from national chains, strip malls, focusing on independent walkable businesses. I think that the plan is addressing those strategies, although it's not fully within the town's control, those mix of businesses. I think this was actually a very perceptive comment and reflected to me that people are really actually getting into the real content of the plan and not just kind of flipping through it, but mixed signals on industrial areas. I do think a little bit we're sending mixed signals on industrial areas, and we didn't have a clear resolution on that either as a committee or within the policies of the town. And I think that's an area of balancing again as we move forward, as the town moves forward, about retaining those strategic areas for transformative uses in the future and allowing the town to accommodate what the next sort of industrial or eco-industrial or sustainable business looks like, while also allowing those areas to become more mixed over time and more walkable and more resident friendly. So that is a balance. Providence Highway, again, a very strong focus. And then balancing economic growth and traffic. So I think maybe the recurring theme here is balance. Housing, some perspectives about large lot zoning being bad for the community, and that's everywhere in the town. The importance of thinking about artists, I think that's reflected in some of the language. Commercial spaces into residential. So if there's a surplus of commercial space, thinking about residential use, and then also meeting the housing needs of the region, which I think is not necessarily, we don't talk about the regional aspects of housing too much in the plan. It's more from a local focus, but it is true that Dedham is not an island within the region. So those forces are at play here too. Some, again, perspectives around overcrowding, but no discernible, what I would say is very clear, like 50 people responded that this one thing in the plan needs to be changed or removed. But I think a lot of nuance with people reflecting on what the plan is getting to. Public art is important in some of the comments. We did get a comment around jargon, so I'll look at that a little bit in this chapter. We didn't see that as much in some of the other chapters, so I'll see if there are some terms which we could simplify. And then needing the capacity to make the goals a reality. And I would just highlight that the Community Preservation Act in this chapter is a very strong way to do that. So I think that shows up very clearly in the plan. Parks, Recreation, Master Plan is referenced in the plan, so that's there. And we can make reference, I think that's important, comment that it has the only public art policy in the town today. So that's a very good specific reference. And then we've been heard comments through the plan in terms of recycling programs, bulk items, but then I've also been having some very good follow-up conversations with your DPW director as well. So getting some good information to fold that into some of the actions. In terms of transportation, some comments and thoughts about reducing through traffic, one-way roads, and getting people to slow down, which I think is overall a good idea. I don't think we heard as much consensus around the sort of a one-way road system in terms of how to actually get that done. Kind of having less intrusive truck access and more industrial traffic, I think is something we've heard. Pedestrians and cyclists getting around safely, that's a major theme of the plan, and a major theme of current events with some of the accidents locally that have happened as well. There was a criticism about the rail trail not showing up as much in the plan as it should or could have from some perspectives, but then there's an equal number of perspectives that think it's probably just about right that it didn't show up as much. And then building more spaces, parking spaces for cars and trucks where development is occurring. Looking at transparency as a key, I think we hit on that pretty clearly in the community facilities and services. Concern about taxes in the town, how contracts are awarded, transparency around those processes. And then a grant specialist who works with all departments, and that's one of our key implementation items. I think that works really well with what's written. Again, transportation and communication in governance, making performance reviews mandatory. That is in the chapter, or in the goal number 4, which was shifted down to goal number 5. Do a better job of letting people know what's going on in town. That's really the ambition of a lot of the goals in the last 2 chapters in governance and community facilities and services. And more concern about Dedham becoming a city through these recommendations. People are reading that into some of the recommendations, though I don't think the intention is there in our work. And then lastly, in public health, and I think some of these comments reflect what we've already talked about, the chapter, that first bullet, it contains a huge amount of concepts. I don't think they said concepts. That might be a typo on my part, but goals and wishes that seem like an overreach or too deep or difficult to make the connections. That looking at protections for children, I think showed up in a few of the comments, which are in the goals. It's a densely packed section with many interdependencies. So that also points to kind of putting it at the end where some of those interdependencies can be more evident. Measuring livability, we do get at that some in the chapter. More programs for specific things like vaping and youth. And then there were some specific questions about the data around the community health needs assessments, which come from the hospitals, local hospital systems. And those data sources aren't entirely within our control, or we just kind of have to report from what they have shown us. So thoughts on, that's a highlight. I know it's a lot of comments and information to glean, but what I saw from it was, again, good specific questions, some that we can react and respond to, no overarching patterns that point to a change which would be necessitated. What we're looking for now, because we're sitting on such a strong foundation of engagement over a 2-year process where we've built up this process of goals and strategies and actions, and really tested those against many conversations. We would have to see a lot of comments about the very same thing to be justified, I think, at this point, to make those changes. And I don't see any type of justification for that. So let's move on to the chapter, which is currently in a public review period. So it's, I'm referring to it as a chapter. I think we're open to what it is. I think it could also be referred to as a draft implementation report. It could be standalone. It could be a draft implementation appendix. And so it's basically, we've taken all of the goals and strategies, which have been well discussed and well vetted by this committee, by the community, by other boards, committees, by staff, et cetera. And we've taken, MAPC has taken those goals and strategies and attempted to put at least one action with a responsible party, any funding resources and a time frame for each strategy. So that leaves us with a pretty substantial table of next steps of implementation actions, suggested implementation actions. And as we had a little bit of exchange as a committee, which Andrew, thank you for kind of initiating that. But I think it was good to send back the further explanation that I offered to the committee, which is basically that this can and should probably be viewed as a living document, which is an instrument of implementation that will be used by hopefully many people in the town, but specifically the implementation committee, which would be hopefully formed out of this process. And that implementation committee will be then deciding on which of those actions within the tables to pursue and check off, how to prioritize them and what to move on first. And then also be making changes and modifying and responding to how that implementation process unfolds, and sort of working with this table as a tool to help them get progress completed on these goals and strategies. So right now, the public comment period began at the beginning of this month. It's open through the next couple weeks, and it's available on the town website. I think we've I think it's out on the town website in some manner as well. And it's on the designingdedham2030.org website at the very top of the page, if people would like to download that and take a look. And we open that up to the committee
Josh,
as well.
can
I
you go
know
back
that,
one moment?
yeah, sure.
I just want to make one note. I think due to, next week's being school vacation, and we want to make sure that, this is there's a wide discourse going on with these, that we're reaching out to, as you can see, we're looking for you as committee members to reach out to your selected or your representative boards and committees and, share it with them and make sure that, whether you're interested in parks or whether you deal with public health, whether you deal with transportation, et cetera, that you're sharing this. This was one of the duties of serving on this master plan, was to share this information. And I'm sure all of you have, but if you haven't, to please, disseminate this information. I'll come up with some bullet points and some scripts for you to have this conversation. But I did want to go back to that. After talking with the co-chairs, we want to extend this comment period probably another couple of weeks to March 11th. Sorry, Josh. So we'll just have to update the websites to show that, but we want to give it a couple more weeks because there is a lot, there's a lot in this. I know you guys have all, gone through this and given us your comments, but we want to take our time with the community, and we have a little bit of time to solicit some more feedback. So again, you'll be hearing from me in the next couple days about, the continuing the conversation with all your stakeholder groups, and, us as staff and some of the co-chairs will continue to outreach to the town departments and the boards, and ensuring everyone's viewed these, and if they have comments or questions, that we're able to address those. Thanks. Sorry, Josh.
Oh, no problem. And Sharna, you have a comment.
Thank you, Jeremy, for mentioning extending the deadline, because that's the reason I raised my hand, was to request that we have an extension of the deadline, because a lot of the boards and committees that are charged with some of these implementation strategies and goals only meet once a month. So I would even suggest going almost to the end of March. For instance, the active transportation work group meets the first Wednesday of the month. So, we want to give these boards and committees ample time to not only take a look at the implementation plan, but then to have a meeting and to discuss it, because as you know, with open meeting laws and with quorums, I think that we need to give them more time to make sure that they've had an opportunity to put together their concerns and then present them to us.
Thank you, Sharna. Very good points. Yeah, I think that's something we can accomplish. Shaw?
Yes, hi, everybody again. So 2 points. Number one, the implementation chapter or appendix or single standalone document, however it is done, I would vote for having it a chapter so it doesn't get lost and float around. But is the sort of the initiator of a process by which the planning board and the select board will, begin to oversee and stimulate the discussion within the town about how to do those various recommended implementations. It is also the case that, I guess I've got 3 points. It's also the case that the planning board has the responsibility under law to adopt this plan and present it to town meeting. And so measuring from today through town meeting, recognizing we have town election in the middle of that period, it is reasonable to think that the planning board's got to have some time to hold its hearings and discussion on the plan itself, because it is they, not we, who have the legal responsibility, both under state law and our town bylaw, to adopt this plan. And the third point I was going to make is that the town bylaw, which really is the basis for why we're working, requires the preparation of a master plan on a decennial basis, but also requires an update with a capital U on a period of approximately 5 years from the actual adoption of the plan. So in that respect, the implementation process becomes iterative because it goes through the first, let's say, the first 5 years, a repeated cycle of review and charge and follow up and so on, led by the leadership of the town. But then during the update period, there's an opportunity to recast the goals of implementation, if you will, or certainly to prioritize them in view of the facts and circumstances on the ground at that time. So those are my 3 points.
Great, thank you, Sean. Other thoughts or questions about this implementation section? Do others have thoughts about the positioning of this section as a chapter, as Shaw just suggested, or appendix, or a standalone report?
This is Nathan, and I think it should be able to be updated more frequently, and so I'm okay with chapter. I apologize, I turned on my light, but I don't know if maybe it gets like a version number or something like that, with the idea that, you know, if in 2 years we want to update it, it gets a new version or something. So just be clear that it's meant to be a little bit more living, like you said.
It's a great idea.
I agree with Nathan that it's something that it needs to be a living document and updated periodically. And I also agree with Shaw that it's not something that we want to get lost and put on a shelf to collect dust. So it should either be a chapter or an appendix to the plan, so that it can actually be a living document and be updated as needed.
Thank you, Shauna. And Andrew, looks like you had a hand up. I think you're on mute, Andrew.
I love the idea of a version number to make it clear that it's a living document. I think that's a brilliant idea. And, you know, make that explicit. I mean, I explained in my email why I thought it should be an appendix. I don't need to rehash that. I thought it, but the one sentence version is, I think it's an appendix because it feels to me substantively different than the rest of the product of the plan. The rest of the plan we have in this committee, you know, gone through, argued over, you know, every line of in great detail, and it is really with MAPC's assistance. I feel confident in saying that it's the work product of this committee. The reason I suggested it's an appendix is we haven't had those kinds of in-depth, we haven't been able to have those kinds of in-depth hashing out of the implementation plan. It's 80 pages. We didn't go over it in anything like the detail that we did the rest of it. And I think it's much more substantively the work product of MAPC, for which I'll credit. I mean, I don't think it's a bad plan. I just think it's sort of procedurally the result of a different process, effectively.
Thank you, Andrew. Jessica.
Thanks. So this makes me think a little bit, I have a question specific to this topic, and then also kind of a broader thing, which is, it makes me think about kind of just how this lives on the town website and how people can access all of this information. And so I think, you know, our expectation has always been that most people would be accessing the plan electronically, but we know that there'll be some people who want to access it on a printed copy. And so I think one thought is that I think it would make sense to include I guess I would lean towards having an implementation plan just incorporated. So I guess I guess that means it could be a chapter or an appendix. I think it doesn't really matter what you call it from my perspective. But I think we may want to have to identify now where would the iterations, the future iterations of the living implementation plan live on the website. So we could include that address in any printed versions of the plan, right? So just so that we're being kind of conscious about how do we point people to find, you know, version 2.0, version 3.0, et cetera. And then I also just wonder more broadly about the website, you know, Josh, I don't know if MAPC is going to continue to host, you know, the history of designing Dedham 2030 in perpetuity. Is that something that the town should be designing a page around to keep that? Because I think it is, you know, I don't know how often, but it is certainly nice to have, you know, the videos of every meeting, information about the chapters kind of in one place. And so if it's not going to live on at MAPC, then I think we want to think about what's the most important pieces of that for us to hold on to on the Dedham town website. And I think then also what's, you know, how do we help make sure that people can find the things that they need, whether it's, you know, I could imagine people getting kind of interested reading a chapter and then thinking, oh, I want to go, you know, watch this workshop where they talked about housing, or, you know, so I think we want to think about, you know, how do you find the videos of some of the most important sessions that we had? And then how are we making sure that we're pointing people to the both the static and the dynamic parts of the plan?
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, I'll check. A lot of work has gone into the organization of that website. So that's a good point. I'll check and make sure what our policy is, but I will suggest that whatever our policy is, I'll suggest back to our agency that it should persist for a while, measured in years in terms of it being around as a resource. So I'll just double check on that. Margaret, yeah.
Yeah, I was sort of going to echo what Jess was saying around how is there a way to present, because it's a lot of text and a lot of information. Is there a way to present the information so that it's accessible to a wider variety of folks via videos or short blurbs, or sort of how does it get disseminated in a way that it has more of an impact? Because some people are not going to pick up the whole document and read it from front to back. So multiple ways of representing the information.
Thank you, Margaret. Sharna, yeah.
I think it would be great if the implementation plan had ways to keep people engaged. So maybe perhaps for some of the parts of the implementation plan where you have different assignments, maybe there's also parts where it says, how can you get involved? And maybe if you're a student, you can do this. If you're a town, you know, an adult, you can do that. But just giving people ways to get involved in the implementation plan without having to be elected to a board or a commission. But what can you do to support this part of the plan?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Really, I could imagine something like that as the Master Plan Implementation Committee moves forward with sort of selecting a project and maybe modeling that transparent municipal dashboard, which we're talking about, an abstract in the plan for a certain project to advance implementation, that there might always be a little reader box that says, what can you do? How can you support this? Or how can you get involved in this effort? That's a great idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure. I think you're on mute again, Joe.
Thank you. This leads me to say that to really direct it to Jess as much as anybody, but in the last master plan, we recommended to the planning board that they institute a master plan implementation committee. That was done at a certain juncture when, after the town boards and committees had had a chance to digest, think about, report on and in some senses respond to citizen input through their normal processes. But on and after that, after certain concrete actions have been taken, we went back to the planning board and asked them to appoint a master plan implementation committee. And I would turn to Jess and just say, I think it will fall to the leadership of the planning board to be attentive to the points that our committee has just made. And it maybe the mechanism is to do exactly that. And that is at the appropriate moment to have a master plan implementation committee that has a continuing, way to gather public input.
That's a very good comment, Sean. I will actually use that as an opportunity to segue. We can continue this. This is a very fruitful discussion, so I don't want to cut it off. But I'll skip past this other stuff real quick. But just to highlight the importance of a master plan implementation committee, and it is discussed in this implementation section. And we have the co-chairs and staff and myself have been thinking about a master plan implementation committee, and you can see the makeup of the committee that was formed after the 2009 master plan, and then some considerations for what that might look like in its next iteration after the 2030 master plan. So yeah, I think that is very important. It's a model that has been used by other municipalities in the region to, I think, great success, to keep the master plan as something that is active and has a dedicated group which is moving its ideas and recommendations along. So this is I think critical to the success of making this not just a planning process that gathers dust. So I don't know if Jeremy or Jessica or Sarah, if any of you have a comment about it, but I just thought we'd shift to this since Shaw brought it up.
Yeah. Well, I would defer to Jessica as she led the last iteration and probably will, as a planning board member, help to set this up to continue this process. So it's, it goes to the implementation phase. She's put down, as you can see, what the former group was put together here in 2009. And then Jessica, I'll let you talk about the bullets at the bottom that you've outlaid.
Sure. So we dug up, and I should also say, so of the members of this committee, myself, Shaw, and Sarah were all on the implementation committee for the last plan at different points. I think Shaw for the entirety of it, and then Sarah and I maybe overlap for a little bit of time, but we're on either end. So the top part is the composition of the last master plan implementation committee, which I'm going to refer from now on as MPIC because it's such a mouthful. And so that was a member of the select board, planning board, a designee or member from finance committee, sustainability, and conservation, and then 4 members at large. 2 were appointed by the planning board and 2 by the select board. So there were 9 total. There were no term lengths that were specified, no budget allocated, but the committee met pretty, monthly, fairly regularly for basically, the 10 years in between the plans. We would expect that the planning board would be the body to set up the MPIC for this plan. But we did, and so I think, the planning board will make the ultimate decision, and we'll have a conversation with, as a board, around what that should look like. But we did want to just kind of get a sense from this group if there are things that we think are important. I think Sharna's suggestion, I think, is fantastic, and we'll build that in somehow into the charge for the committee. Maybe part of the charge will be, kind of making it really clear that it's a process that continues to involve the public in the same way that the plan itself engaged the public. But in terms of, thinking about the composition, as well as other things, it'd just be good to kind of get thoughts here about what else, what is the right thing. You end up, the last one had 9. There's always a trade-off between having people at large versus having committee representation. So we want to make sure that we can have a really inclusive committee, which is easier to achieve when you have at-large members. But there also needs to be a balance so that we do have, I think, representation from the key committees, both in terms of to some degree authority and also accountability. Sarah had going through the implementation plan and thinking about what's kind of different about this plan and what's different about, kind of what's required for that. The Board of Health and the Health Department are mentioned quite a bit. Obviously, we now have a whole section on public health. So that seemed like a board that might be worth adding representation, as well as the active transportation working group. There's so much around walkability and safety that seemed like it might be worth asking each of those, boards for representation. But I guess let me just start with composition. Or do people have strong thoughts about composition in terms of what we'd ultimately recommend to the planning board? Yeah, Sharna, go ahead.
I would certainly add to that someone from the Human Rights Commission, because the parts of the plan do speak to equity. So I would love to see a representative from the Human Rights Commission. And I'd also love to see some type of student representation as well, so that we get representation from our younger populace.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other suggestions? Margaret, go ahead.
I wonder, someone from the schools, given that they're the largest budget driver of the town.
Thanks. Andrew, go ahead.
I think given the focus of the plan, Board of Health, yes, definitely. If they're willing to be involved, the other entity that sprang to my mind, because I think there's a lot in the plan that relates to what they do, is Parks and Rec or some other entity along those lines. Curiously enough, since I come from the Conservation Commission background, I didn't see as much in the plan that really related to the work of the Conservation Commission. Yes, we do talk about preservation of open space, but we're sort of mostly adopting the open space management plan. That is sort of incidental to the, well, I won't say it's incidental, but it's not the core of the work of the day-to-day work of the Concom, which is really driven by the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw there. We didn't have a whole lot of recommendation, to my recollection, for things, changes to those, that bylaw or those processes. So it may be, if you're looking to keep it small, and I say this sort of, even though this is my bet, maybe Concom is not as essential this time around. Just based on the focus of what we have in the plan.
And if we take Concom out, we could say it was at your suggestion, Andrew.
Yeah, well, Fred Savian isn't around to beat me over the head with anything around anymore.
Great. All right. Thank you.
I support that too. I'll
All right.
as current vice chair, I totally support that.
Okay, great. Thanks, you too. Alex, I see you with your hand up.
I just wonder a little bit about whether you want to kind of make the statement that, this is implementation and then therefore should probably skew towards actual elected boards in the town as opposed to commissions, which I feel as though you may get similar people from the commissions as members at large, simply because, of their engagement in town politics. Now, not to say that you might get the same from committees, but I just wonder about this actual committee itself. I mean, we have select, planning, parks, schools. Anything else? Am I missing something? Whether it should mimic it or not, it would be my question.
Great, thanks. I should add to one, I did not put all the verbiage from 2009, but one thing that it did suggest was that the at-large committee members have some sort of relevant expertise. So it could be, land use, developers, just what I forget what the language was. And I know Josh had found some language around the formation of the Milton implementation committee, which was similar. So the idea is having, some expertise where possible to do, to make sure that we're getting that. Let me go to Sharna and then ask just a question of the group around the at-large elected balance. Go ahead, Sharna.
So what I was going to suggest was that because some of the support functions within the implementation plan are the responsibility of some of our commissions and committees, I would hesitate towards limiting their involvement in the implementation plan. So I would strongly suggest that we also include someone from the Disability Commission. We also want to make sure that we're not excluding anyone at all that in particular that has some of those support functions. So I would be more willing to open it up to more participation as opposed to less participation.
So in terms of, I guess what I wonder is, having sat on the implementation committee in the past, I mean, it's really a working committee. And I know at times, so for instance, when the 2009 plan was set up, there were the composition was slightly different than what you see on the slide, because I think at that point there was a member of the Historic District Commission, and I think also maybe open space. So it was actually set up to be very committee heavy. And we had to go to the planning board in like 2016, I think, and ask them to revise the composition, because we simply couldn't, many of the committee, the representatives from different commissions and committees weren't able to come regularly. And so we often couldn't always make quorum. And so we had to go back and revise and wait more heavily for at-large members. And so I think, based on the different things people just said, we could be at like an 18 member, if we added everybody, we could have 18 members on the committee, which is a little harder for implementation, I think, for a real working group in terms of whether it's getting quorum, but also I think just staying focused. And the idea of the implementation committee, would be to meet regularly, if you're working on the goals around the open space plan, would be to be meeting with Parks and Rec and open space to kind of accomplish those. So I just say that because I wonder, just if we could zoom out for a minute and just say, regardless of which specific committee or board we ask for representation, what's the right balance? Because the more committee members we get, the fewer at-large members we have, which then, and given the way we all know Dedham works and the research all shows Dedham works, right, just means that we get a less diverse group of people. It's a stumper. Go ahead, Andrew.
But if the purpose of this is to implement the plan, to get it done, not to hash out for the beginning sort of the policy questions or the overall goals, that we've done that. If the focus is really on action, you need enough people with enough power on the committee to make stuff happen. If it's purely or perhaps mostly weighted towards at-large committee members, at-large members, it seems to me it becomes too easy to be just sort of the gadfly outside group, the people with the actual power to make things happen, ignore.
Thanks, Andrew. Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what's the value. And if we value an equitable and inclusive process, including the implementation, then the answer is it needs to also have at-large members who can bring in, because the majority of our boards are mostly white and tend to err on the side of male, but not always. There is a change afoot in some boards, in commission. So I think that if we really value equity and inclusion, which we were trying to in the plan, then in the implementation, we should try to model that as well. And perhaps there's a way to create a system and a structure so that everybody who's involved has some sort of accountability and sort of structure to be able to have influence, even if you're not on a particular board or committee or commission.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. All right, so this is helpful. I'll move on just to, I don't know that we need to go over all of these at length, but I think that's a particularly just helpful conversation around composition. Okay, Shaw, go ahead, and then I'm gonna just summarize the other ones.
Sorry, I
right.
think this militates towards a committee of 13 with 7 from the prominent boards that can do things and 6 at large. And just depend upon Jessica and her colleagues in the planning board having heard these comments to make sure that when appointments are done, that they fill in the gaps of inclusivity and so on, that the appointees of the particular committees, commissions, boards, don't fill somehow. But it's good, this is all volunteer work, and it's going to depend on people who are really motivated to get on board. So we're going to have to go out and get our, do our best effort here to spread the word and get our, the people from our communities really engaged and offer themselves as volunteers here.
Right, everyone in this committee can talk about how great this experience was.
Yeah, but I think for this committee, the implementation committee, the committee of 18 is unwieldy and unworkable, actually. I mean, I've chaired every kind of committee you can think of in size, but 18 means that 2 people do all the work and everybody else blesses it. And it's not the kind of process that is good generally.
Great. All right.
In this context, at least, I think.
Thanks, Sean. All right, so super helpful for us to kind of tee up as a conversation with the planning board. And then I'll just point out the, term length is something that I'm going to suggest, I think, that we look into. I think that's hard when you have a committee that essentially is, going to work for 10 years, but there's, it's not clear what a term is. And then Josh actually has found kind of some precedent for implementation committees having just, modest budgets, which we also thought was a great idea. So I think that Milton's was $35,000 a year. And then at times they have actually gotten more for specific projects, but it would allow the committee to have, I think, a little more basically to be able to get consultants where they need to in terms of studies, and also making sure that we're never kind of the implementation of the plan is never bottlenecked by other projects, staff responsibilities, et cetera. So that's another thing that we'll look into for the implementation committee. So thanks all. I'll hand it back to you, Josh.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And my apologies for taking the liberties with our agenda there, but I just couldn't miss the opportunity of a nice segue.
It made sense.
So just to circle back, were any other thoughts? I didn't mean to also shut down our conversation about the implementation section. If there were any other thoughts that people wanted to raise with the group. All right, so then the next item we have would be the endorsement of the master plan. And I think for this, I will hand it back to Jessica and Sarah to maybe facilitate that vote.
Sure. I'll jump in briefly and absolve Jess as one of the planning board members. We will ostensibly be presenting this report too. We talked a little bit about whether this part of the process was necessary, and just procedurally it's not required. However, I mean, for a lot of reasons, not the least of which how much time and energy has gone into this, how much real sort of broad community output, how many hours of us all looking very deeply at pages and pages and pages of this plan, that we thought it was important to have some mechanism by which we endorse the plan as it goes to the planning board. And I guess, you know, we thought hard about the language of that. I think it would be hard to say we approve, right? Certainly there's not every word of the plan is something that I personally, or even I as representative of the select board, necessarily feels 100% in support of. But overall, wanting to put forward a sense that this committee is recommending in a united way to the planning board that this report move forward. Just sort of in advance of that, and we'll talk about the specific details, we've kind of teed up the schedule by which the planning board will hear this plan presented, as well as asked the town moderators accommodation for a brief master plan presentation under reports of committees at town meeting, and the opportunity to provide some materials through the town meeting process to town meeting members on the final plan. So, so this endorsement, I guess we're sort of seeking support to move forward with what's recommended.
I make a motion to endorse the plan as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Do you want to ask for any,
Aye.
just any,
Aye.
oh, just technically, I just wondered if you should call for a discussion first, just in case.
Oh, is there any discussion? Sorry, you can tell I don't share these things very often. Any final discussion before, and am I supposed to do a roll call because we're on Zoom?
We should. And I'll also
Okay.
just say during the discussion, since Deacon isn't here to vote, that she did email us to let us know that she had a last minute conflict tonight, but if she could be here, she would be voting yes to endorse the plan.
Yes, let the record reflect
Yes.
Diekman weighing in with the chairs. All right, so I will do a roll call just in order of my screen. So be on your mute buttons, people. Sean McDermott,
Aye.
Dan Marr,
Aye.
Jessica Porter,
Aye.
Alex O'Connell,
Aye.
Sharna Borsellino,
Aye.
Justin Humphreys,
Aye.
Andrew Titler,
Aye.
Josh Gennady,
Aye.
Margaret Adams,
Aye.
Nathan Gauthier.
Aye.
Is that it? And Sarah McDonald, I vote aye. I think that is all the committee members. So we are unanimous in our endorsement. Thank you all. Very exciting.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, you approved the minutes too. Sorry, bad joke. Thank you. So if I can take this piece. So we've put together, and I believe we sent out meeting minutes. Unfortunately, we had a backlog, but we've gotten caught up. And so we're looking to get approval of, what is it? What are you with? February, March, April, May, June, July, September, October, and November. Yeah, we met almost every month of 2021. And so hopefully all of you have read those. I haven't heard any requests for comments or edits. So be happy to hear a motion to approve those in their entireties as presented. And if you folks are open.
I move the approval of all the minutes as recited.
Second.
Second.
We can do a verbal aye on this.
Aye.
All those in
Thumbs up.
favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Great. You can also note that there was silence.
Thank you.
All right.
Josh,
Anyone
if you can,
abstain?
so next steps.
Jeremy, may I just say one thing before I do have to go? I'm getting a call coming in.
Okay,
I just want to say, this has been an absolutely fantastic experience from my perspective. I think the leadership of the committee was terrific. I think the professional help we got was outstanding, both at the town level and through the MAPC. And I just am exultant in being able to endorse this plan. I think it's going to be a fantastic contribution to the history of this town. So enough of that. I have to go, but thank you one and all.
Thank you, Shaw. So we've hit a lot of these, but I'm going to reiterate these. We're going to continue the feedback on the implementation. We listed all the things we're going to do. We will extend. We'll take a look at the timeline for extending it to the end of March, or at least to the middle of March, as we had discussed. We'll keep you posted on that, and we'll finalize that in the next day or two. Integrating final edits. We discussed the implementation committee. I'm sure there'll be conversations, after this is, starting the summer about, putting that together, and Jessica will keep this committee all in the loop, and need your help informing that. Most importantly, big meetings coming up. We've talked about this. Wednesday, March 23rd, 6 p.m. will be the first meeting, I guess, whether it's a hearing, meeting, a meeting with the planning board to discuss hopefully their endorsement, whether it's that meeting or it takes multiple meetings. Hopefully we can do this in one, but we'll be presenting the plan very similar to the community meeting back in October, a synopsis of all that we've done, all that you've done, and all that the community's done to put this thing together. I will say a component of that, we're actually, I was hinting at Josh, he's the only one that's seen this in its entirety. We'll actually be putting physical copies of, we'll stamp it draft, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of this draft one. It won't be the final one, which we will definitely print up, and we'll use very nice paper, and we're not gonna, there'll be limited editions, so you're gonna have to take very good care of those. Because they will be expensive to print, but we do, it's great to see this finally in print and a nice presentation. But at least you'll see the first iteration of that prior to that meeting. You as committee members, we hope that you can be there and make every effort to be there. We want to leave time on that agenda. While it will be a presentation, we'd also love for your testimonies and what you've got out of this process, similar to what we talked about at the community meeting back in, yeah, that was December. Sorry, it wasn't the fall. And so similar sentiments about this process and what it's meant to you and what you think it's meant for the community and for the next 10 years. That'll be very important. And then ultimately, a very quick update and overview of the master plan to town meeting. I believe we've been approved by the moderator to give a very short presentation of this to the, we definitely want to, that's a great place to spread the word, but also I think we want to take an opportunity to also recognize the master plan committee members at that. So hopefully you all are already going to the town meeting, but if not, we'll keep you posted on that. We hope that you'll be in attendance, and we definitely want to recognize your tireless efforts and over 2 years commitment to this, which is an understatement. So very important next meetings. I'll continue to keep you updated on those. And obviously you'll be I'll be in touch in the very, very short time about, disseminating this information about the implementation plan. I believe, Andrew, I see your hand up.
Something perhaps I should have said when Sarah, you called for comment. So our vote of recommendation should be understood, I guess, to be subject to final edits and minor editorial comments, but the understanding that if there are major policy changes, probably should come back to us.
At this stage, I mean, all the
Unlikely,
strategies.
I know, yes.
Yeah, I mean, this will be, the actions, the priorities, the strategies, those have all been well vetted. And if anything, it will be minor tweaks, maybe of responsibilities to the implementation stage. Maybe we got a board or committee wrong and we're going to change that, but all the substance, it's there. That's what you were voting on.
Right, and I guess I should put my comment in a more positive light, which is, for me at least, I think it's understood that there will be minor editorial edits, that this is understood.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, do we have any other slides? Our illustrious website, which, yeah, I'll definitely have to, Jessica brought up a good idea of how do we, what's the legacy of all this information? And, at least in the short to midterm, this will be the resource. I know we do have this website domain, that we'll be able to utilize, and whether it's hosted by MEPC or we migrate this toward the town, we will continue that. All this will continue to be a resource, hopefully for the next, at least, couple years. And if we need it for the next 10 years, we'll find a way to, keep it up there. So that was a very good point of, continue all this. So I'll leave it to the co-chairs. Do you have any, or actually I'll open up to the public. Thank you, Josh. Anyone from the public have any comments?
If there's anyone here, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you over. And while you decide whether you want to do that, I'll just thank Susan's PC for her message in the chat. Make sure everybody saw that. She said, thank you all for your time and effort on this master plan. So thank you, Susan. And thank you, Susan, for being here. Okay, with that, looks like
I'll leave it the co-chairs last words to all as a committee. I know we're sad and there's tears in our eyes that this is our last one, but I wish we could end it in person, and it feels a little melancholy that we have to do it unfortunately over Zoom, but this won't be the end. As we said, this is going to continue. For me, one of my sentiments, if I may, I've done a lot of planning processes. I would say none as comprehensive as long as this one, and not long in a bad term, but think of how many meetings and how much topic we've gone through, how much efforts have been put into this. I feel like this is probably one of the gold standards master plan processes, I would say, for the state. Think of how many touches we've had with the community, how many hours of outreach, how many community meetings, how many survey participants, how many people that came to these meetings. I feel like this is definitely a gold standard. And, Josh, if you think back, some of those representative plans that he brought to us, and continually we exceeded all those, community participation numbers and quantity of participants and comments of any of those other plans. So, and we couldn't have done that without you and this as a team, as a village. So I'm happy that I was part of this. And I definitely learned a lot about Dedham as I was a newbie when I came in, and I feel like I know a little bit more, but you held my feet to the fire. So thank you all, and I'll hand it over to the co-chairs.
It's perfect timing for you, Jeremy. The best way to learn about your new community is to do the master plan. Well, I just want to just quickly point out, so I'm hopeful that we will see each other all in person, at the very least at town meeting. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised if that planning board meeting in March is in person. As part of our official final committee meeting, I really want to give a huge call out, both, I guess, two groups. One is to Josh as an individual, as well as all of the MAPC team. I think that we would just not have the comprehensive plan that we have if it weren't for Josh and his team. And so I'm again hopeful that Josh will be with us at the planning board meeting. He's not planning to come to town meeting. But I'm hopeful that that many of you will be there at the planning board meeting, so that we can kind of give Josh the live and in-person round of applause that he deserves, because it really has been a fantastic partnership. So I just want to stop and rest and first do a kind of virtual thank you to Josh and MAPC. Thank you, Josh. And Carolina isn't with us today, but obviously she's been, an absolute delight to work with. And I think really helped us achieve a lot in terms of our outreach, as well as the plan content. I mean, she's terrific in every dimension. And then lastly, just, both Jeremy and Michelle, in terms of, this is obviously a huge load for the planning and zoning office. And so I just want to thank both of you for tremendous support over the course of these 2 years. It's been fantastic, well organized, great communication to the committee. So thanks to both of you for all of that work. And Sarah, I don't know. I kind of jumped in. I don't know if I didn't mean to steal any
Can
thunder.
I add one in there? I think while you were on that, we also had a community outreach group. I know they're not with us. They
Right.
came to some of our meetings, and let's give accolades to all those that have participated. So, round of applause for them.
Yeah.
I can't name the names off my cuff, but they were, they did a lot of groundwork for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just echo those thanks, and to everyone who sat on the committee for this many months. It's been a real pleasure to hear so many diverse points of view, different areas of expertise. I said to my colleagues when I was sort of lobbying to be the representative on this committee that this is the one place that you have the opportunity to explore any corner of the community and think about what the future is. And I don't think we left many corners unexamined in this process. And I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. So thank you all.
Thank you all. Josh, you want to say anything? I know you do.
I can't resist. You're right.
I know.
But I would like to thank you all for all of the wonderful in-depth conversations we've had. And I really do give you accolades. I've worked with a planning committee in my career, and I think you all shine and have really put your heart and soul into this effort, and it shows in the plan. So thank you for all your time.
Yes, thank you for your thousands of hours of commitment to this, Josh, and MAPC's team. We couldn't have done this without you guys and your support. So
It's
make
been
sure
our
you pass
pleasure.
it on to all your peers and colleagues that participated. That we thank you very much for your help.
I will let the team know, and I know they all enjoyed working with you all as well as in the community. And we're the regional planning agency, so we look forward to working with you all on some implementation efforts too.
Awesome. Well, if anybody's lonely on Tuesday nights, I'm happy to continue to send out a Zoom. And
Yeah.
just if you're all distraught at having these big gaps in your schedule.
I'm sure there'll be other meetings that we can fill the gap. Well, thank you all. And we'll see you on the 23rd, and we'll keep you posted about all the updates coming your way.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Great job.
Adjourned.
Bye-bye.